Thank you, Dean. I'm happy to be here today to talk about our project, which is not very far from here, a little more than 2 hours away. And I would invite any of you to come up and visit us sometime and see what we're doing in Kannapolis. Well, I was interested also to hear the topic of your seminar today, because as I was thinking a little bit about the similarities in our communities, and there are obvious ones with the textile history and textile background, I was interested that you referred to the development of a knowledge-based culture and not what I've heard many other times in other seminars, a knowledge-based economy. Because you really can't develop a knowledge-based economy without first developing a knowledge-based culture. And that means trying to educate people, trying to get them to buy into the vision, trying to help them see why that vision is important to them and what they can contribute to that. And I hope I can show you a little bit today about what we're doing as a company, but also about what our partners in this project are doing. And we have many partners, so I'll tell you a little bit about those. So this is the centerpiece of the North Carolina Research Campus. This is the David H. Murdock Core Laboratory building. It's a center focused on what we like to say the intersection of nutrition, human health, and agriculture. But this is what it looked like before, and this is where I started. So I am a product of a textile family. My parents worked in the mill. I worked in the mill during college. My friends and my family worked in the mill. And I remember when I graduated from college and was working on my master's, I got a job not in the textile part of the mill, but in the office. And I remember what they said to me when I was hired. You know, if you just do your job and you just do your job, you don't have to do nothing more, nothing less, you can work here for the rest of your life. So, famous last words. About 6 months into my job, this plant, which was 6 million square feet, the largest textile plant in the world, bigger than the Pentagon, was bought by a gentleman named David Murdock. Now, Mr. Murdock is still my boss 32 or so years later. But Mr. Murdock invested in textiles at probably the worst time that anybody could invest in textiles. So as soon as he bought Mills Company, he started to see lots of imports from China, India, and other places. And in 4 years, he decided textiles weren't for him. So he sold this plant to a company called Fieldcrest Mills out of Virginia, actually out of Eden, North Carolina, plants Virginia. And then it was later merged into Pillowtex, which was a Texas company. So we'll fast forward a little bit. This is what it looked like in 2003. And when Mr. Murdock sold it in 82, it had 21,000 employees. And then Pillowtex declared bankruptcy, and about 7,000 people lost their jobs. Now, unlike this area, which you all are so blessed with many different kinds of industries, more than we had in Kannapolis, we have one industry, textiles. And so about 4,000 people in Kannapolis lost their jobs. Now, I'll back up. What was really sad about this was that many of those people who worked at Pillowtex at the time and at Canon were functionally illiterate. They knew how to do one thing. They knew how to weave, or they knew how to spin. You know, my job, when I worked at the mill, I cleaned spittoons. So had I not gone to college, I guess I'd spent the rest of my life knowing how to clean spittoons. Which has got to be the worst job you could ever possibly have. Good incentive to stay in school when your parents make you clean spittoons. But we had all these people who lost their jobs, and they really had no options. When Mr. Murdock then, now I'll back up and tell you a little history. So when he sold Canon to Fieldcrest and then merged with Pillowtex, he kept a lot of the real estate, a lot of the property in Kannapolis, including his home. So I continued to work for him, and I managed his real estate all over the country. And he called me when the bankruptcy was announced and said, you know, what's going to happen to this big plant, this giant plant sitting in Kannapolis? And of course, you know, I had visions of like the windows being broken out and mice climbing through and vagrants living in the plant, and you know, just being a horrible facility. And the bad part of that is, part of the property that Mr. Murdock had kept was the downtown area, which was right beside of this plant. So Mr. Murdock decided he was going to go to the bankruptcy auction and bid on this piece of property. And he did, and he was subsequently bought that piece piece of property. And we decided the textile mills really had no value because they were all cut up and they were different sizes and just were laid out in a way that weren't conducive to keeping them. So we started this massive demolition project, which began in 2005, 2006. Way in the top of that slide, you can see downtown Charlotte, so you can see how close the site is to downtown Kannapolis, to downtown Charlotte. And Mr. Murdock decided that, thinking about the knowledge-based economy, I remember when he called me to tell me he'd won the property at the bankruptcy auction. I said, we need to come up with a story, like really fast, about what we're going to do with this property, because right outside my window, I'm looking and there's like, one of those TV vans with the satellite thing on it. It's Channel 3, and there's Channel 9, and there's like 4 vans sitting waiting to ambush me when I came out to find out what Mr. Murdock's grand scheme was. And he said, well, we can't tell them we don't have a plan. We're not very smart. So he thought for a second. He said, just tell them I want to put people back to work. And I think, that's the essence of what we all want to do. We want to take people who have lived their lives working in one industry. If that industry's gone, then we want to find ways to put them back to work. And Mr. Murdock's, the thought was, well, these are good people, they have good work ethics, but unfortunately they're not educated, they're not trained to do anything else. So how can we take them from using their backs to using their minds, to using their intellectual skills? And I have to say, that was a little bit of a challenge. I remember when we had the groundbreaking, for this building, a lot of people that I worked with in the mill, and these were, at the time, they were older, many of them were retired, came up to me and said, this all sounds great, but it's really not going to help us. Or, well, you're just going to have a bunch of PhDs, working in these buildings, and we don't have degrees, so we're not going to have jobs. Or, a rather pessimistic view from a personal perspective about how this would help them. And it's sort of a hard thing to say to people, but the lesson that has to be learned is it's not going to help you if you're not willing to help yourself. And so one of the first things we did was begin to work with the community college to retrain people, to get them back to school. We paid for their classes, we paid for their textbooks, to get their GEDs, because many of these people did not even have high school degrees. And so people began to go back to school to get ready for this project. So here's a picture of the master plan. The buildings that have the eras are buildings that are there or under construction, including our centerpiece, which is the building you just saw, the David H. Murdock Core Laboratory building, which houses the David H. Murdock Research Institute. And then we have several universities on our campus, which I'll tell you about in a minute. The City of Kannapolis has a convention center, a conference center, and a city government center under construction. The Cabarrus Health Alliance and a medical building, and then the existing downtown area. So here are some of our partners on the campus. We're a public-private partnership based on life sciences, bringing industry and universities together to really do science in a new way. So as we were thinking about what to put on this piece of property, Mr. Murdock and I traveled all over the state, and then we traveled to places like Harvard and down to the Pennington Center in Louisiana. We traveled to California, where Mr. Murdock's from, looking at other life science centers. And the first thing, which is obvious, you have to be really smart to figure this out, is that these life science centers cluster around academic institutions. And so we then figured out we had a problem because we didn't have any academic institution in Kannapolis. So we went to the state, some of our legislators, and said, Kannapolis is a poster child for what has happened not only in the South, but in other areas of the country. We've lost textile jobs, we've lost tobacco jobs, we've lost furniture jobs, we've got thousands of people out of work. We would like to partner with you to create this life science center. Now, the good thing about being in my role at the time was it doesn't hurt when you go to your legislators and ask them to do something to have somebody on the other side of the table who says, and I'll invest $1 billion if you'll do that. So my boss, thus far, has spent about $850 million on this campus. We didn't wait for our legislators to say, we're going to spend it, we're going to do it before we did it. We went ahead and started building these buildings, and at the same time began working with our legislators to bring 7 of the campuses from the UNC system to our campus, and at the same time we're working with Duke University to do a pilot project in Kannapolis that's a longitudinal study that I'll tell you about later. But from the UNC system, we have the 2 flagship institutions. We have UNC Chapel Hill and NC State, and then we have Appalachian University, UNC Greensboro, North Carolina Central, North Carolina A&T, and UNC Charlotte. Each have their very unique roles that they play on the campus. We have companies like LabCorp, Dole Food Company, General Mills, Monsanto, and others, some startup companies there as well, who are all working together to really kind of create this convergent theme of human health, looking at collaborative opportunities between industry and academia on things like human nutrition, food science, plant nutrition, wellness, personalized medicine, and then hopefully at some point biomanufacturing. We've so far created about 967 jobs on the campus, sponsored research of about $56 million. That's industry research over and above what the universities receive from the state of North Carolina. And in the 3 years we've been open, have published over 300 articles in scientific journals. This is a little bit about our UNC institutions that are on the campus. And you can see how the breakdown, they get state funding, and then they go out and raise their own funds and sponsor research, and they all have their own individual niche in terms of what they're working on. And the challenge was, as Chancellor M.U.R.D.O.C.K can tell you, just because you're a part of the USC system doesn't mean you always work so well with the other partners in the USC system. And some of these folks didn't do that very well either. Now I remember the first time I had all of these folks together in a room, and I was a little nervous about it because I thought, I'm the only person in here who's not going to know everybody. Then I realized I was the only person in there that did know everybody. None of those people had ever worked before together on collaborative projects. They're used to working in their own silos. They were not accustomed to having to share facilities, share grant opportunities, share research initiatives. So it's taken a little while to develop that sense of trust and that sense of, we're working together on common goals here, and actually it's starting to work very well now. And I would say there's not an institution on this list who is not collaborating with 2 or 3 of the others on some of their research. Things like, this is NC State, for example, their initiatives cross many blurred lines here, from plant science to food science, to nutrition, to human health. For instance, we might have a project that NC State has initiated because they think there's a bioactive compound in blueberries that might have something to do with staving off the onset of Alzheimer's. And we're testing that right now through UNC Chapel Hill's Human Nutrition Institute and Appalachian State's Human Performance Lab, looking at cognitive ability of older adults. We're feeding blueberries, we're watching them. We have control groups that don't have a high intake of blueberries, but it takes all of these universities working together to achieve the goals. North Carolina A&T, one of our the HBCUs on our campus, really doing great things. They were one of the lowest in terms of the state funding. They got the lowest amount when we started this project, and now they've now tripled their space, mostly because they didn't sit back and wait for more money from the state. They went out and got funding from federal government, from private companies, and are collaborating with other universities, including Clemson's up there, so that's good. We actually do a lot of collaboration with Clemson on our campus. Talked earlier about Rowan Harris Community College. They were a very important partner for us in the beginning, because if we really were starting to think about how we could transition the workforce from this textile economy to the knowledge-based economy, we really needed to be partners with a community college. So we have a facility that's been funded by the state that is on our campus. that is strictly geared toward life science, job retraining, nursing programs there. They have a 2-year degree in biotechnology, other programs like lab technicians, phlebotomists, that sort of thing, train on the campus. They have career services, career opportunities, so they can help people who really don't have a clue how to get back into the workforce. We have tons of interns that come from the community college system that work in our labs, and then in many cases we've been able to hire those interns in the labs. And then companies like Dole. Dole had a lab in California. It was a nice lab, but they didn't have the opportunity to really work with this kind of collaborative group of people on things like obesity, working with high-performance athletes, addressing issues like blood pressure, heart disease and stroke and diabetes, which are all lifestyle-related illnesses that can be controlled if we just learn how to put the proper things in our body. Dole is working with people like NC State, primarily NC State, but also Appalachian, UNC Chapel Hill, and A&T on projects right now. And then we publish lots of articles as a result of this collaboration. One of our most publicized articles was a study that Dole did on bananas, which compared the effects of an athlete intake from Gatorade and bananas. And of course, we like to sell bananas because that makes Mr. Murdock happy and he gives more money to our campus. But bananas are cheaper, they're all natural, they're healthy, and not to disparage Gatorade at all, but having sugar water versus a natural product, we like people to have the natural product. We found that there was absolutely no difference in the recovery time and inflammation in an athlete eating a banana every 15 minutes versus Gatorade. This is a startup company that spun out of the University of North Carolina at Chapel Hill. We're starting to see a good bit of that activity right now, and this happens to be a company that was formed in China. This Chinese researcher hired a PhD, hired by UNC Chapel Hill, had his own little technology related to diabetes and insulin resistance, and now he's spun out his own lab and is starting to commercialize this product. So giving these people the opportunity to grow in an environment where they have a lot of flexibility and a lot of opportunity to collaborate has been a key part of our success. And then I talked about Duke University's involvement on the campus. So they're not getting funded with the state allocation because they're a private institution. And so, a bunch of smart people at Duke sat around and tried to figure out what could they spell with Murdock. They did a really good job of that, the measurement to understand the reclassification of disease of Paris and Kannapolis. And that yielded them a $35 million gift, Mr. Murdock, in 2007. It's a fabulous study. It has really engaged our community. It's a longitudinal study that will register 50,000 people to study diseases. And why do we want to know that? Because all of us in this room are different. What was different about Dr. Jim Fix, who was a health guru, ran marathons, weighed 150 pounds, he never smoked or drank, and died at age 52, and Sir Winston Churchill, who does not look like a picture of health. 270 pounds, smoker, drinker, heavy eater, and he lived to be 90. What's fair about that? Well, what we hope to learn from the Murdock study is looking at individualized medicine in different disease categories like arthritis, cardiovascular disease, diabetes, liver disease, things like Alzheimer's and depression, various types of cancer. We're mining all of this huge database of 50,000 people. I think we have a little over 12,000 people signed up right now. And then we're using the technologies, the omics technologies that we have in our core lab, genomics, proteomics, metabolomics, to understand how people's individualized lifestyles, what they eat, how they exercise, how they live, affects their eventual decline into disease or their eventual good health. And so we're working with Duke on that right now, and as I said, that has really energized our community. We have 25 full-time employees working on this and interns, paid ambassadors from the community, And then, believe it or not, in the beginning, we were trying to figure out how to get people to sign up for this. Women are easy, men are hard because they don't want to give blood. Men are all chickens about giving blood. So we gave them like a $10 gift card to Target, and we tried like another little trial run to see, well, would people still sign up if we didn't give them a $10 card? They still did. They didn't care about the gift card. What they cared about was their part of something life-changing. Not for them maybe, but for their grandchildren. So if we can start to understand the origin of diseases like Alzheimer's or breast cancer, hopefully someday down the road, we can start to diagnose people earlier, more effectively, personalized medical treatment for people so that we're not just all treated the same way for insulin resistance or for breast cancer. That study is starting to yield other funding. So we just were given a $2 million grant that came to Duke from NIH that then funneled through the Cabarrus Health Alliance. Now, that is a partner on our campus that in the beginning I have to say I was a little dubious about, because here we have Mr. Murdock spending $800 million on this beautiful core lab, and I have to say I was one of the ones in the beginning that was a little bit resistant about having the people who were coming to get their vaccines or their substance abuse issues handled right beside of this core lab. But then, as I started to really understand what this campus is all about and how it really can't mean very much to any of us unless we can impact public health, I saw the value in that. And we now have a beautiful public health department set up like a hospital authority right on our campus. We work with them daily on some of the research that's happening on our campus and translating that into the local community. And you can ride by that facility anytime, day or night, and you'll see people learning to do an exercise class, people in this beautiful teaching kitchen learning how to prepare healthy meals for their children, people understanding, being counseled as to why their lifestyle makes them a repeat customer of the Health Alliance, and how if they eat better, take better care of themselves, they can live healthier lives. And so that's a very important partner for us. And then one of our other partners, the David H. Murdock Research Institute, is a not-for-profit institute also funded by Mr. Murdock. He's invested about $150 million so far in this. This is where we partner with Clemson. So sometimes if Clemson has needs that they can't meet on their own campus, whether it's some of the state-of-the-art equipment that we have or analytical capabilities, through one of our various core labs, we'll work with Clemson to help them solve some of their research problems. You can see we're partnering with industry and academia and other consortia throughout the country. We have some international partners as well. This is the Health Alliance building, which I mentioned to you earlier. It has over 200 employees and sees about 230 patients a day. And then the City of Kannapolis, also a strong partner for us. They just rebranded themselves as a healthy city. They're building parks, they're building walking trails, bike trails, all aimed at trying to reinforce what we're doing on our campus. And really trying to help people understand that, again, this is part of the culture. It's not just a lot of people sitting up in this building doing research. It's about how we all live as a community and trying to help people understand the consequences of poor diet, poor lack of exercise. This building's under construction right now. Another one of our partners, Spectrum Discovery, with 56 employees from New Jersey. And this is a company that helps the other companies that we have on our campus understand consumer testing and that sort of thing for sensory perceptions. Here's a picture of some of our people who work on the campus, and you can't really see, can't see so well, but I have to say one of the biggest culture shifts for us in Kannapolis with a whole town of mill workers was embracing these people. And these are, if you look closely, you'll see there are a lot of faces on there that you can just see were not born in Kannapolis. So we have a lot of Asian scientists, we have Indian scientists, we have Muslims, we have Hindus, and they're not all Southern Baptists like a lot of Kannapolis people. They worship differently. They don't all like to eat at McDonald's every day. And so embracing those people, it's been very invigorating to see how that's happened. And I think someday if I just got really bored, I could write a very interesting sociological history of what's happened with our community, from wheel workers to embracing these kind of people. Things like the First Baptist Church offering up their sanctuary for other types of religions to have services in their church, or having afternoon concerts and saying, we don't care where you go to church, just come worship, just come be part of this concert, or we'll have free box lunches, just come and meet our community. The school system, local school system recently raised $25 million on their own for the STEM Academy, trying to help young people understand that whereas before in Kannapolis, you could walk down the street and you could worship the statue of Dale Earnhardt, and that can be your role model. Now, you can look at these men and women walking around in white lab coats, and they're going to be your new role model. So, that's my presentation. I'll be happy to stay around afterward and answer any questions that you might have. And again, I welcome any of you to come visit us and be happy to show you around and see what we're doing in Kannapolis.